papers that have been presented to you this morning, with the first one being by Carol. Carol, well, 3 papers, as many of you have understood, are on the prison environment in France and the connection between Islam and the prison world in France. And the first paper by Carol was about French schools. So Carol starts by quoting Linda Krieger, who argues that stereotypes, much like other categories, are cognitive mechanisms that all persons, not only those that are prejudiced, resort to in order to facilitate the task of gathering, registering, and keep information on persons in our memories. To her, stereotypes are central, indeed, to Krieger, stereotypes are central, indeed necessary to a normal cognitive functioning. Carol uses this quote as the framework to her paper. Her study of Islamophobia and the French education system is based upon 2 notions. First, stereotypes are natural and necessary, and they are detectable both among prejudiced people, Islamophobes in this case, and also among the people who are prejudiced against, in other words, in this case, Muslims. All of which tends to complicate our understanding of Islamophobia, which is too often simplistic. Much of the data collected for this research by Carol is taken from an ethnographic and qualitative study carried out in French schools, a public high school, lycée, and 1 Muslim high school, collège and lycée. This includes interviews with school governors, as well as current and former pupils. In her 2011 analysis, 60% of students from the public school have declared themselves Muslims. Among these, 28% associate Islam with violence. In other words, 28% among the Muslims themselves associate Islam with violence, whereas 50% of non-Muslims associate Islam with violence. It's actually noteworthy that no Muslim student from the Muslim school, as opposed to the public school, actually made that connection between Islam and violence. Although these pupils, in many cases, actually live in the same areas. One anecdote will suffice to illustrate this contrast. In Seine-Saint-Denis, 1 non-Muslim student with a Moroccan background admitted to trying to pass off as Portuguese throughout her years in high school. She said, I was afraid, I quote, I was afraid that my teachers might discover I was Moroccan, which would lead them to believe that I was Muslim, which I'm not. I was also afraid of what other Moroccan students might think. They wouldn't understand my being Moroccan and not Muslim, unquote. So you have a kind of double fear here. One linked with stereotypes associating an ethnic identity, Moroccan, with a religious identity, Islam, in this sense and context. The other fear is linked with some potential peer pressure, by which is meant the fear of being judged or misjudged by fellow Moroccans. Now what about the Muslim school here? What's key in this research is that the students have very varied backgrounds in terms of ethnicity and social class, and what actually brings them together is their religion, Islam. The immense majority are indeed Muslims. There are a few odd exceptions, but very few. And they are proud to be Muslims. They evolved in an Islamic environment, which provides a stark contrast with the public school, of course, the first school that she investigated. One student confided, I quote, "The school has given us pride in being Muslims. It has brought us together and given us confidence and helped us assume our Muslim identity." Many agree, many in the Muslim school agree that France is racist, yet they nearly all believe that neither race nor ethnicity are fundamental elements in this racism. They all believe that old-style racisms have been, as it were, supplanted by outright Islamophobia. They feel stigmatized as practicing Muslims, not so much as Arabs, or not at all as Arabs, for those of them who are Arabs. Overall, Carol insists on how negative stereotypes are legion in the public school, even among Muslims themselves, whereas Muslims in the Muslim school cultivate a sense of pride which forestalls any negative stereotyping. Muslim students in this specific school also generally believe that Islamophobia will tar all Muslims with the same brush. As they say, bad Muslims as well as good Muslims. So that was the summary of Carol's paper. I'll try and bring the three next summaries together for very obvious thematic reasons. The first paper about Louis-Saint-Quies is based on a two-year fieldwork on the radicalization process in jail, which was financed by the French state. And it took, it was in 5 different prisons throughout the country. So she actually did research on among prison staff, social workers, religious staff, chaplains, and obviously inmates. The first thing that she starts by saying is that, and this is corroborated by Farad a few minutes later, is that inmates in general don't talk about Islamophobia. I mean, only a very small minority of them will talk about Islamophobia. Those, for instance, who went to universities or had degrees or something. They will talk about, many of the inmates will talk about distrust of Islam or scorn of Islam. She argues that Islam is the first religion in jails, especially those that are called maisons d'arrêt. In other words, the maisons d'arrêt in France are those prisons that have inmates who are actually awaiting trials. So much of her research is based, I believe, on actual maisons d'arrêt. In some of the jails that she investigated, some of the maisons d'arrêt, there are about 60% of Muslims. In France, freedom of religion is guaranteed in all private closed circles, be it hospitals or indeed jails. In other words, what it means is that all religions are meant to be represented. Religion is also key for many inmates in the sense that it helps them reintegrate mainstream society and gives them a sense of self-confidence and self-assertion. She argues, she states that Muslim religious workers or chaplains, their number has been multiplied by 4 over the past decade, which is quite a dramatic increase. But despite that, there is still a very, very clear problem of understaffed. So I still have 5 minutes, right? Okay, so well, I'm going to have to skip a whole lot of things then. Ouiza doesn't raise the issue whether there is any Muslim community in jail. Obviously, there are many different rituals and beliefs and practices, so it doesn't really make sense to talk about a Muslim community as such. I'll move on to Farad's paper. I think Farad's paper makes a distinction between 5 categories of relationships inside the jail world. The first one being those secular guards, mostly from the east of France, who are laïque or secular, and the inmates. Many of these guards are clueless about the behavior of rebellious Muslim youths, whom they see as more or less radicalized, and the key notion here is fundamentalism, which generally serves as sort of a vague umbrella term. The second category that he has a look at is the actual North African guards versus, or their relationship towards the Muslim inmates. There are few North African guards, but still this relationship is interesting in the sense that there are some critiques by Muslim inmates of these North African guards as being turncoats or traitor to the Muslim cause. But in other cases, those Muslim guards, those North African Muslim guards, will say "Salam alaikum" to these inmates in cases where there is no sort of Franco-French person around, a non-Muslim French person around. Okay. The third category, which is probably more complex, is the guards from the dom-tom. In other words, the black. Some of the black islands in the Caribbean, for instance. I don't know whether dom-tom means anything to any informed persons here, but I don't have time to explain further. So some of the...
Not only Caribbean.
Yeah, I know. But,
Overseas
Department and territories.
This will be taken off my time. Am I right? Okay. Okay. So overseas territories, dom-tom blackguards, and in the French jails, around 60% of the guards actually originate from there. So it's a very, very large number of people. And the dom-tom inmates who actually happen to have converted to Islam. So you have very, very complex relationships between these, with the guards seeing the fundamentalists, seeing those that are converts as fundamentalists, or sometimes they are dismissed as outright weirdos. Whereas the converts to Islam will see the guards as will dismiss them sometimes as sons of slaves. In other words, people who haven't been liberated by Islam. The fourth category is the guards vis-à-vis the secular French inmates, many of whom believe that things like, we have been invaded by Islam. In these French prisons where we are here, they have been, as it were, invaded by Islam. This is not France. This is not France anymore. This is their general feeling. Of course, there's a large degree of Islamophobia in it. Farad has a look at whether the category of Islamophobia is valid within these 5 categories. The fifth category is the relationship of guards vis-à-vis the Salafis. Despite the many attempts by the French administration in prisons to quell Salafism, Salafism is an established fact in prisons. So Farad has a look at that too. I have 1 or 1.5 minute bartering here to try and summarize Claire's paper in English. Okay, she has a look at the various data that are available regarding the number of Muslims in prison, and states time and again that there is no clear scientific validity to the actual calculating of Muslims in prisons. And she also has a look at the actual paradox between the kind of religious blind Republican idealism of not calculating, not providing religious or ethnic statistics, versus indeed the temptation within the prison administration to actually calculate the number of Muslims in order to investigate the potential number of radicalized inmates inside prisons. She also has a look at the various times in history, whether it be the early 1990s with the Cal scandal, but also the publication of L'Islam en prison by Farad Khosrow, which made a lot of noise in the media. The different times in recent history when indeed there have been debates on the number of Muslim inmates in French prisons. She invites us probably to be very, very cautious in reading certain newspaper articles, whether it be from Le Monde or Le Figaro, because there seems to be apparently a consensus on the fact that there are more than 50% of Muslims in French prisons, but this is not clearly scientifically validated. And it seems that even this figure has crossed the Atlantic with a recent article in the Washington Post. One positive consequence in Farad Khosrow's book, which is very important and shouldn't be underestimated, and I'll probably finish on that, is the fact that it has made this book, published 10 years ago, did make prison administration aware of how badly Muslims fare in prison. In other words, there's a large number of Muslims in prison. The actual number is hard to gauge, but they fare very badly in the sense that the number of Muslim chaplains, for instance, is too small when we consider the number of Muslims. And obviously, she has a look at the culturalist stereotype, which is fueled by this pseudo-scientific notion that more than 50% of inmates in France are actually Muslim. Thank you.